absolutely nothing, but you know, it's just I need it. It love to every time they reach around and can you use Salman my last name? I said my name for me, he said Salman. Money. नहीं और मैंने नहीं कहा कि मैं क्या कहूँ मैंने सिर्फ परवीन बताया कहती हैं मैंने कहा सारे सलमान है ये भी सलमान ही yeah mashallah मेरी अब मेरी ख्वाब में आएंगी ना तो मैं बताऊंगी कि मुझे कोई माने क्या नहीं कहता मुझे खलवा आप लोग कजन है आप लोग दिल की बहन है इनकी बहन जो इंग्लैंड में है मैं उनको भी मिली हुई हूँ तो आज मुझे सर्टिफिकेट भी मिल गया मैं साइन कर दिया मुझे थोड़े लोग जब मिलते हैं ना जिसका नहीं मिलते तो वो पूछते हैं कि अभी खोजा तो मैं उनको कहती हूँ वेल हम 99.9% खोजा most of my life is with खोजा I was 20 some when I came here
so how is that on what basis to get up to
nah really nama ayah ni Emily came at Bali, right?
Yeah, she
came here very early.
She didn't have daughter, she had sons. And she said, mashallah, mashallah. So she had boys and she said that Allah didn't give me the daughter, but now he gave me daughter and granddaughter because I had 4 months old baby girl. So she fell in love with her and me too, I guess. So सारा दिन उनके पास याद है फातिमा भाई खातियों उनको भी जानते होंगे हाँ उनको भी जानते होंगे तो they used to speak in Gujarati
We are from the same hometown
but they used to speak Gujarati and I started learning you know just listening and I used to smile and I would answer and Fatima bhai said Sharan bhai your big ro Gujarati तो फिर उन्होंने स्वाहिली बोलना शुरू की तो मुझे स्वाहिली भी समझ आना शुरू होगी फिर उन्होंने क्या कच्ची बोलना शुरू की तो मैंने कहा आप मुझे पुरानी जुबान में सिखाते थे
She was very generous lady
Bhai, I have never met anybody like her. Heart of gold. I think वो भी मेरी बहन है तो अब देखें आपने थोड़ा सा मैं कंट्रोल कर लिया अपने ऊपर I think I'm used to seeing you more so before every time I would say happy birthday and I would start crying I do I do when I do
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردن الرحمن بدر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلمون نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه شعرا وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يرى أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم يرى الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون صدق الله العلي العظيم. الفاتحة.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور الذي خلق 7 سماوات طباقا ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت فارجع البصر هل ترى من فطور ثم ارجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسعا وهو حسير ولقد زينا السماء الدنيا بمصابيح وجعلناها رجوما للشياطين واعتدنا لهم عذاب السعير وللذين كفروا بربهم عذاب جهنم وبئس المصير إذا ألقوا فيها سمعوا لها شهيقا وهي تفور تكاد تميز من الغيظ كلما ألقي فيها فوج سألهم خزنتها ألم يأتكم نذير قالوا بلى قد جاءنا نذير فكذبنا وقلنا ما نزل الله من شيء إن أنتم إلا في ضلال كبير وقالوا لو كنا نسمع أو نعقل ما كنا في أصحاب السعير فاعترفوا بذنبهم فسحقا لأصحاب السعير إن الذين يخشون ربهم بالغيب لهم مغفرة وأجر كبير وأسروا قولكم أو اجهروا به إنه عليم بذات الصدور ألا يعلم ما من خلق وهو اللطيف الخبير هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وإليه النشور آمنتم من في السماء أن يخسف بكم الأرض فإذا هي تمور أم أمنتم من في السماء أن يرسل عليكم حاسبا فستعلمون كيف نذير ولقد كذب الذين من قبلهم فكيف كان نكير أولم يروا إلى الطير فوقهم صفات ويقبضن ما يمسكهن إلا الرحمن إنه بكل شيء بصير أمن هذا الذي هو جند لكم ينصركم من دون الرحمن إن الكافرون إلا في غرور أمن هذا الذي يرزقكم إن أمسك رزقه بل لجوا في عتو ونفور أفمن يمشي مكبا على وجهه أهدى أمن يمشي سويا على صراط مستقيم قل هو الذي أنشأكم وجعل لكم السمع والأبصار والأفئدة قليلا ما تشكرون قل هو الذي ذرأكم في الأرض وإليه تحشرون ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين قل إنما العلم عند الله وإنما أنا نذير مبين فلما رأوه ذلفة سيئت وجوه الذين كفروا وقيل هذا الذي كنتم به تدعون قل أرأيتم إن أهلكني الله من معي أو رحمنا فمن يجير الكافرين من عذاب أليم قل هو الرحمن آمنا به وعليه توكلنا فستعلمون من هو في ضلال مبين قل أرأيتم إن أصبح ماؤكم غورا فمن يأتكم بماء معين صدق الله العلي العظيم. سورة الفاتحة.
پر محمد وآل محمد صلوات. To increase the blessings of the gathering, please recite a louder salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Muhammad wa ali wa Jafar. Wa alaikum salam. Abbas, Abbas, Abbas alamdar. Abbas, Abbas, Abbas alamdar. چلتی ہے یہ سانسیں تیرے پرچم کی ہوا سے. عباس 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 علمدار. چلتی ہیں یہ سانسیں تیرے پرچم کی ہوا سے. عباس 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 علمدار. ٹوٹے ہوئے دل کو یہی دیتا ہے سہارے. ٹوٹے ہوئے دل کو یہی دیتا ہے سہارے. مشکل میں چلے آتے ہیں اس در پہ ہی سارے. بہتر نہیں کوئی بھی سکینہ کے چچا سے. عباس 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 علمدار. چلتی ہیں یہ سانسیں تیرے پرچم کی ہوا سے. عباس 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 علمدار. شک ہم کو نہیں کوئی تیرے لطف و کرم پہ. ہم اس لیے آتے ہیں تمہارے ہی علم پہ. جو چاہے دلا سکتے ہو تم ہم کو خدا سے. عباس 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 علمدار. اس بار ہمیں بھی ذرا بلوائیے آقا، اس بار ہمیں بھی ذرا بلوائیے آقا، بے چین ہے دل آپ کو معلوم ہے مولا، ہم کیسے رہیں دور بھرا کرب و بلا سے، ہم کیسے رہیں دور بھلا کرب و بلا سے، عباس 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 علمدار، چلتی ہیں یہ سانسیں تیرے پرچم کی ہوا سے، عباس 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 علمدار، تم پیار مجھے کرتے ہو حد سے بھی زیادہ، جب بھی میں پریشان ہوا ہوں میرے مولا، تم خواب میں آ کر مجھے دیتے ہو دلاسا، عباس 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 علمدار، ازلان در حضرت عباس پہ جاؤ، ازلان در حضرت عباس پہ جاؤ، حالات جو دل کے ہیں وہ غازی کو بتاؤ، پہلے ہی عطا کرتے ہیں وہ ہم کو دعا سے، عباس 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 علمدار، چلتی ہیں یہ سانسیں تیرے پرچم کی ہوا سے، عباس 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 علمدار، صلوات علی محمد و آل محمد۔ نکلا ہے جنازہ کوئی اللہ کے گھر سے، نکلا ہے جنازہ کوئی اللہ کے گھر سے، افلاک میں ایک شور ہے ماتم کے اثر سے، افسوس کے مسجد میں نمازی گیا ہمارا، افسوس کے مسجد میں نمازی گیا ہمارا، کچھ کم نہیں یہ حشر ہے قیامت کے اثر سے، شبیر کو یاد آ گئی، ارے شبیر کو یاد آ گئی خود اپنی سکینہ، شبیر کو یاد آ گئی خود اپنی سکینہ، زینب کو ہٹایا گیا جب لاش پدر سے، زینب کو ہٹایا گیا جب لاش پدر سے عباس ذرا زینب مضطر سے خبردار، عباس ذرا زینب مضطر سے خبردار، فریاد میں ہٹ جائے نا چادر کوئی سر سے، نکلا ہے جنازہ کوئی اللہ کے گھر سے، یاد آ گیا زینب کو وہ پہلو شکستہ، یاد آ گیا زینب کو وہ پہلو شکستہ، رومال ہٹایا گیا بابا کے جو سر سے، نکلا ہے جنازہ کوئی اللہ کے گھر سے، ہاں بھول نہ جانا انہیں کوفے کے مکینوں، ہاں بھول نہ جانا انہیں کوفے کے مکینوں، گزریں گی یہ شہزادیاں اس راہ گزر سے، نکلا ہے جنازہ کوئی اللہ کے گھر سے، زینب سے یہ کہہ دو کہ وہ دل کھول کے روئے، زینب سے یہ کہہ دو کہ وہ دل کھول کے روئے، شبیر کی ہمشیر ہے، شبیر کی ہمشیر ہے، رونے کو نہ ترسے، نکلا ہے جنازہ کوئی اللہ کے گھر سے، صلوات علی محمد وعلی محمد۔ سورۃ المبارکۃ الفاتحہ۔
Sheikh Bilal, my brothers and sisters, my respected elders, my brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum. Our family definitely appreciates you guys coming here for a memorial for our father. I think, and thank you, Asim, for the beautiful recitation. I think if we can start off with recitation of Surah Fatiha, please. Next up, we have our cousins Mustafa, Shakil, and Murtaza with some words. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. When I was asked by Abbas and Tahira to talk about Marhum Hussain today, I told them I would be very honored. Everyone can hear me okay? Okay. I told them I would be very honored. I was extremely wrong in saying that. An honor applies to an outsider. And as one of Tahira and Hussein's adopted sons, this is really my duty. Today, many will come up here to the podium and share their personal memories of Hussain. And before I do that, I just want you to raise your hand if you are a Zanzibari, connected to a Zanzibari, married to a Zanzibari, or know a Zanzibari. Please raise your hands. So that's a lot of people. So I'll try and do something different. I will attempt to share the history that made this man. Knowing Hussain and his pride in his roots, I believe that this is how he would want to be remembered. I call this brief historical piece the Jangbario and the Immigrant. To understand Hussain, you have to transport yourself back to a time way before the marhum was even born, all the way back to the 1870s and 1880s, when Dewji Jamal and a few others rebelled against the religious practices and the giving of dasond of the Khoja Shia Ismailis, and turned to the faith that we all now cherish today. During that time, one of the first Khoja Shia Nashi communities was founded in Zanzibar. This was Hussein's beloved hometown. This fledgling new community defied the odds by overcoming assassination, bullying, excommunication, severing of family ties, and a broad and devastating socioeconomic boycott. A couple of decades later, Aga Khan III foretold the death of this community by declaring that with utmost confidence that these Khoja Shia Nashis would be extinct in 10 to 20 years, not more. Okay. Yet they prevailed in a cosmopolitan setting, protected by a welcoming population, and with an unshakable belief in their faith. They not only survived, but thrived. In 1964, they experienced the trauma of the Zanzibar Revolution, and yet again, they survived and thrived, finally leaving those gentle and colorful islands and ending up in many different places, inclusive of where we stand today. If you take that island, our community, its culture, and its history, and shape it into a person, you would have Marhum Hussain. Hussain embodied in his very soul and being the place of his birth, the tenacity, iron will, unshakable faith, deep roots in the community, complete devotion to the extended family unit, and of course, the very unique brand of humor and street smart wit. My name is Shakil Pira, and I have no blood relations with Hussain. But Tahira, Marhum Hussain, and his family have embraced and nurtured me as their own because it was a Zanzibari thing to do. I remember clearly in the spring of 1990, Hussain, Tahira, and the kids had hosted 3 immigrant families, a total of 15 or so people, including my cousins here. All of us new immigrants waiting to be processed so we could start our new lives here. And we started in their Elmont home in Long Island. Abbas, Atik, and the twins, just like their father and mother, had given up their bedrooms so that our parents could sleep on proper beds. A total of 9 kids slept in various places in the living room of their Elmont home. That very first night, the very essence of Hussain came to be. I think we all know that he was a night owl, and he wanted to be in control. He heard something at 2 a.m. in the morning, one of the kids probably just, turning their head, but he came right up to the point where he thought he heard the sound. He shone a flashlight into my eyes, asking me if I was asleep. it would be obvious to most people that shining a bright light into someone sleeping and talking to them would wake them, and they would have to answer in the affirmative. But that was Hussain, generous to a fault, with an unshakable belief, and that he was acting in your best interest, whether you agreed with him or not. Okay? And performing that service with classic Zanzibari humor. That was the Hussain I loved. That was the Hussain who helped me get here. That is the Hussain that we all miss.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Sheikh Bilal, respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's really good to be back home. New York is my home. I'm a New Yorker at heart, so it's really good to see all these familiar faces. But first and foremost, I'd like to request all of us to take a moment to recite a Surah Fatiha for our beloved Hussain uncle and all our marhumeens. Surah Fatiha. I'd like to start by thanking each and every one of you for honoring our beloved father and uncle on his 1-year death anniversary. When Abbas called me and said, Baijan, it would be very special if you could say a few words at the Majlis. And I said, yes, of course. I said it right away. At that moment, however, I realized once again that we had lost our beloved Hussain uncle, my second dad. I realized that I had lost my dad again. I'm sure a lot of you know our family, especially, like I said earlier, me being an original New Yorker. I have 2 sets of parents, Marhum Saftar Ali Jafar, and my other dad is Marhum Hussain Ismail. And as I was thinking over what to write and what to say today, most of it, if not all, was done with a lump in my throat and a very heavy weight on my chest. I'm still not confident of getting through this, but inshallah I'll try my best. To sum up what Hussain uncle meant to me, to all us kids, to our entire family in a few minutes is impossible. And the toughest part for us all is that none of us are used to him not being around us. When I came to the US and into my first home in the ever so famous Elmont home, there was a little issue with me having to stay in the United States because my Dar parents had to go back home. And I remember Hussain uncle and Pupijan Tahira came up to my parents and said, "Hi panja chokra hai," and they literally next day took me to the court, signed me up as their adopted son, and that was how my life began in the US. Growing up with him was not always easy, as even Shakil mentioned. But I do mean that in a very loving way. We would at times argue and complain with Hussain uncle. It was not just his way or the highway. I'm sure everybody knows this. It was his way or his way. To be honest, I realized that I would not change that for anything today. I had to go through this once, like I said earlier, with my dad, Saftar Ali Jafar marhum, and now having to go through this again with Hussain uncle's departure is a mountain that's very hard for all of us to climb. Hussain uncle was honest, caring, protective, forgiving, and a man of some pretty strong principles. He loved having our ever famous Thanksgiving dinners, which even expanded to outside of the immediate family, and I know that many of you can attest to it. He knew what each and every one of us kids liked to eat from the turkey, so he would make sure he ordered enough so that everybody got their leg piece or their wing piece, and he always thought of everybody way ahead of time. What remains with us is to know and experience that Hussain uncle was caring, supportive, forgiving, and always wanted the best for all of us. This is something that I really noticed in him all the time. He had another family that he loved tremendously. It was the New York community. He was gung-ho about this community. From the chai and the biryani that was made at the mosque, we would have discussions about how great the biryani in New York is, to the programming and all the people. He loved it and he loved you all. He's no more with us, and none of us can say to him how much we miss him or we love him. What we can do is pray for him and for all those that are not with us anymore. A presence from our family has gone. A voice we loved is still. A place is vacant in our lives that never can be filled. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us, our beloved Hussain uncle, and all our marhumeens. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As my cousins have spoken, words cannot express how much love there was for our beloved Hussain uncle. The entire family loved him. He loved this community so much. And one thing that I can add to what my cousins have added, that he had this love for his children. And the children, you could be the youngest grandkids all the way to the elder kids like Shakil and Mustafa. One incident that I do remember, and before I say this, he also had the love for our Ahlul Bayt. He was the lover of Imam Hussain, he was a Zawar, and he had infinite love for his faith. Mustafa mentioned when we moved here into the United States, I remember I was about 10 or 11 years old when I moved the first day at the Elmont home. We're trying to get accustomed to the United States. And I heard that the postman, the mailman, was driving up and delivering all the mail. So I told Hussain uncle, is it okay if I go and grab the mail for you? He said, yeah, please, that would be great. It was winter time. And I was not used to seeing snow, so I was always volunteering myself. Hey, I want to go outside and play in the snow. So I grabbed the mail for him, and when I saw the first mail, it said, Hussain Ismail, you've won $10 million. And I was so excited to see, and ran into the house and said, Hussain uncle, we're rich. We won $10 million. And with this excitement, the rest of the family just had a kick out of it and making fun of me. But Hussain uncle was so supportive of just explaining to me what junk mail is all about, But anyhow, we all love Hussain uncle. We remember him by praying for him and remembering him through the beautiful memories that we can share with him. So with this, let us recite Surah Al-Mubarak Al-Fatiha. Kul arwahul mu'minin wal mu'minat.
Thanks, Mustafa, Murtaza, and Sheikh for those kind words. Next, I'd like to invite Inayat uncle to come say hello. Say something good, right?
Sheikh Bilal, my elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. Today, as we gather to remember our dear marhum Hussain, it's difficult to believe that he left us already 1 year ago. For so many of us, Hussain was more than a friend. He was like a brother. For me especially, our bond went far beyond friendship, rooted in the shared experiences we had almost all our lives. From growing up as young children in Zanzibar to immigrating to New York in the 80s with young families. Our lives followed similar paths, but we became more closer since we served as joint treasurers for Sijni, helping to build a strong community. His work ethic was second to none in all that he did. He worked tirelessly to support his family, dedicated countless hours to Jummah work, and would still always be ready to lend a helping hand to all those around him, and would do so wholeheartedly. Hussain could connect with anyone, young or old, in Kiswahili or Kachi. He would find a way. And he did this in his unique way, with a booming voice and his hallmark grin, often teasing and making light of any moment. I would like to take a minute to address Tahir Bhai, Atika, Abbas, Asif, and Asifa. We know the past year has not been easy for you, and that you all must miss him in both the big occasion as well as small moments. Your dad was immensely proud of each of you and your individual accomplishments. He often spoke about you kids and would proudly share your news, from high school achievements to university acceptances, first jobs and career milestones, news of your engagements, and then finally the crown jewels of our life, excitedly sharing the news about the birth of his 6 Wajukus. As I'm sure you all know, his legacy proudly lives on in each of you and your children. As we reflect on his life today, let us celebrate the legacy of a true brother. Hussein's life was a meaningful one, proven by the fact that even though he's gone, his kindness, compassion, and selflessness continues to inspire us all. We pray Allah showers His mercy on Hussain and grants him a lofty place in Jannah. Ameen. Let us please remember him and all marhumin in Surah Al-Fatiha. Al-Fatiha.
Nathan, thank you for those words. Up next, we have a small presentation by Papa's first grandson, Rayan. Rayan, you ready? You want to hold the mic? You want me to hold the mic?
Growing up with Papa. When I was a baby, Papa spent a lot of time with me. He fed me fruits and even ice cream when Daddy didn't want me to have it. He sat with me at mosque, took me to see the leopards at the zoo, picked raspberries with me. We had so much fun. Papa loved to celebrate. He put cake on my face on my first birthday and let me have cake when it wasn't a birthday. I love when we all got together. Papa was always in the middle, making sure everyone was together and having fun. Papa really enjoyed spending time with my sister Jannah, Anaya, Zara, and Alina, and my brother Aiden. He loved his grandkids very much. When Papa got sick, I was very sad. I used to pray to Allah for him to get better all the time. Papa still prayed with us and used to make us smile. Even though Papa is on his way to heaven, he is still with us. In what he taught us and the great memories he helped us make. We pray for him every day and go to Kabristan to recite Surah Yasin for him. Thank you all for coming today to remember my Papa and letting me share my memories of him. Will you all please recite Surah Fatiha for him? Please also recite Surah Fatiha for Papa Savraj, who has been celebrating his 75th birthday today.
The young boy is right. Hussaini is in heavens. And just tell you something, on Ashura night, he was in a hospital. I have a text. He tells me, Mullah, soma ile marsha unguja. Manake sikuzi watu wasomi. Please read for me that. So I said, Hussaini, Ashura sauti na kauka. And this marsha is very yakuvuta. Kanambia try. And then we went to the hospital the last night before he died. So this marsha is for Brother Hussaini. Bar Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad salawat. حسرت کی صبح لے لو غربت کی شام لے لو ہر سائے میں عزا کا مولا سلام لے لو ٹوٹے ہوئے دلوں کا مڑ کر سلام لے لو آقا سلام لے لو شمرے لئی جلائی شمشیر کس گلے پر زہرا کے دل پہ ظالم خنجر روا رہا ہے یہ دیکھتی سکینہ خنجر روا رہا ہے آقا سلام لے لو عباس کے علم کی یاد آئے گی نشانی پانی تو گر چکا ہے ٹکڑے ہے غم سے سینہ آنسو بہا رہی ہے مشکی زہ سکینہ آقا سلام لے لو خون میں تڑپ رہا ہے کریئر جوان بیٹا شبیر ہے اکیلے میت بڑی جوان ہے لیلا سنبھال لینا اکبر کی لاش جا کر آقا سلام لے لو اور ایک یہ حسرت میری عابد کو سنانا پیارے میرے جب قبر غریب و تو بنانا اے آقا و مولا تم لا کے سکینہ کو ترائی پہ بٹھانا صدقے کی طرح لاش میری گرد پھرانا تلقین میں کہیو مجھے شیدائے سکینہ تلقین میں کہیو مجھے شیدائے سکینہ اور قبر پہ لکھ دیجیو سکائے سکینہ اللہ لعنت اللہ علی القوم الظالمین بار الہ واسطہ شہداء کربلا کا بار الہ واسطہ ابو الفضل عباس کا اس مرحوم کے گناہوں کو معاف کر بار الہ مرحوم کو جنت نصیب کر الفاتحہ
Thanks, Uncle, for that beautiful recitation. I know it wasn't uncommon for Papa to say how much he loved your recitations in mosque. I remember that night vividly in the hospital, and I'm sure he heard that, and I'm confident he heard us here today as well. Next, I'd like to invite Sheikh Bilal for a quick lecture. Thank you.
رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وما هذه الحياة الدنيا إلا لهو ولعب، وإن الدار الآخرة لهي الحيوان لو كانوا يعلمون. آمنا بالله، صدق الله العلي العظيم. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat for ta'jeel faraj sahib al-asr wa zaman. These majalis of where we commemorate the barsi, the passing of someone, the annual passing of an individual from our community, from our family, are always a reminder of how quickly time passes. When someone leaves us in that moment, we have this emotion that we wish time would stop because the world has stopped for us. You can't imagine what the next day is going to be like. You don't know what's going to come to you next in that moment, and you wish that nothing would come next. But before you know it, time moves on. Before you know it, time has passed. Therefore, these points in time are a moment of reflection for us. Famously, it would be said that when, for example, a janazah would pass through the haram of the imam, that people would be shook by this experience of witnessing a janazah. And unfortunately, in our time, it's become so common that maybe we pause for a day or two and then life goes back to normal. So when we have these opportunities, it's a great opportunity to take stock, to ponder over, to think about, what am I doing? Where am I going? What is success in this life? As such, there was actually a very interesting conversation with one of the mu'mineen that I was having where we were discussing, and alhamdulillah, I don't think anyone here knows this person, but in this conversation, I'll share with you the context so that you can understand the point of the question. This brother, we were talking about traveling, we were talking about all these places, and someone was mentioning we should go for ziyarat. And I said to this brother, let's go for ziyarat. He looked at me and he laughed and he said, I'm trying to go to Hawaii, different desert. And I was like, come to Karbala and I promise you, you'll get the money to go to Hawaii as well. Just come at least. He says, Sheikh, Allah created this life to enjoy. I intend to enjoy it. And Allah created the hereafter to enjoy, and I intend to enjoy that as well. The comment threw me for a loop for a second. I didn't know to stand up or sit down, and I was like, I think you have something wrong here. This doesn't sound right, and it doesn't seem like you've gotten something, you're missing something in the fundamentals here. And that brought the question in context of how to answer this question, that is this life something to enjoy? Is this life a place of pleasure? Is that what we're supposed to do here? How do we measure a successful life? Can it be measured by the pleasure and enjoyment that we have in this life? And living in the culture and environment that we live in, I don't find fault in anyone who says, I want to go to Hawaii. As a matter of fact, I think we're all curious about Hawaii. The discussion briefly is, if I wanted to understand what it means to have a successful life, can I measure a successful life? And did I enjoy my life? And to that end, the conversation comes about that what does Islam view, what does the Quran view of the value of this life and its enjoyment? How do we put into perspective, where does, in my list of priorities, does the enjoyment of this life fall? As such, it's a brief conversation through some of the verses of Quran where Allah sheds perspective on how it is to trace this and treat this life. If you'll participate with me with your loudest of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. When it comes to the life of this world, Allah addresses the life of this world a number of times in the Quran, and in specificity, He addresses the hayat of this dunya in at least 4 specific verses that we'll take a look at to get a perspective of this conversation. The first of these verses that we began our discussion with from Surah Ankabut, verse number 64, Allah makes a statement that He repeats again in the Quran. He says, وَمَا هَذِهِ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا لَحْوًا وَلَعِبًا. And what is this life except for a plaything and a sport? And وَإِنَّ دَارُ الْآخِرَةِ لَهِيَ الْحَيَوَانِ لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. And certainly the true life is in the hereafter, if it was that you were to understand. In Surah Ankabut, the 29th chapter, the 64th verse, Allah makes the statement of saying, be careful of this life. This life has very little value in the eyes of Allah. It's a plaything, it's a game. Don't take it too seriously. This idea of not taking life too seriously and not being too invested in this life, Allah repeats again. But the second time He repeats it in Surah An'am, verse number 32. وَمَا الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. And what is this life? إِلَّا لَعْبًا وَلَحْوًا. Allah reverses the order, that instead of saying لَحْوًا وَلَعِبًا, He said لَعْبًا وَلَحْوًا. explaining that whether you prefer to say, call it a plaything, or you call it a game or a sport, in the same context, this life has very little value. This life, be careful. Don't put too much value in this life. It has very little value in the eyes of Allah. He repeats again, وَمَا الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا لَعْبًا وَلَهْوًا. That it's a plaything and a sport. وَلَلدَّارُ الْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لِلَّذِينَ يَتَّقُونَ. And certainly the hereafter is better for the ones who are pious. أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. Will you not ponder over this statement? Will you not think about this idea? That what is my purpose that I need to accomplish? Where do I need to spend my time? If I'm prioritizing my life, Allah is saying that if faith is central to you as an individual, if you acknowledge and believe that Allah exists, then the enjoyment of this life is something that is foolish and frivolous. Don't invest too much into it. Allah again points to the context of understanding this, of understanding why this life is considered a plaything. Where in Surah Al Imran, he begins the statement, he says, كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ وَإِنَّمَا تَوَفَّوْنَ أُجُورَكُمْ يَوْمُ الْقِيَامَةِ. And certainly you will be given your reward on the day of judgment. فَمَنْ زُحْزِحَ عَنِ النَّارِ وَأُدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةَ فَقَدْ فَازَ. And whoever it is that gets away from the fire of hell and is removed away from the fire and is made to enter the garden of paradise, he has attained the object and the successful point. وَمَا الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَتَاءُ الْغُرُورِ. And what is this life? What is the life of this world if nothing but a provision for vanities? The context Allah is setting for us by having this conversation and pointing this out is He's giving us perspective that the true success in life and true value in life is not what's accomplished here and what you see in front of you. Rather, the true success in life is that in my akhirah, did I attain something? Did I achieve a goal that is of permanence? The perspective of this talks about the idea of what is the enjoyment of this world in comparison to what is the enjoyment of the hereafter. You see, the enjoyment of this world is always with consequence. There's always a complication. You like to eat sweet food? Sure. Can you eat it all the time? No. Can you eat it without consequence? No. You're going to have problems with cholesterol, problem with diabetes, problem with weight, problem with skin. Anything you want in that process of enjoyment in this world, there will be a consequence that you will have to forfeit. The least is you eat too much sugar, you're going to have an upset stomach. But nothing that you will enjoy will come without a consequence. Any action that you enjoy in this life has a consequence. Yet Allah is promising that I will give you a place of enjoyment to prioritize. That success that you attain there will be no negative consequence to any of the enjoyments that you wish to have. There is no harm that comes to you. There is no point in which you will come to a difficulty because of the pleasures that you enjoy, whether psychologically or physically. So Allah says the goal and priority that I want you to have is that be successful in this life and don't focus on the short-term pleasure and enjoyment. Rather, develop and focus on that enjoyment that I have promised you. This idea of understanding that the true satisfaction doesn't come in this world but is in the hereafter is a point that Allah signifies and shows that not everyone will be able to appreciate this concept. That it takes someone who has an understanding of something more than what's apparent to be able to appreciate that there is a good consequence of action and behavior. That we take a look and we see when, for example, in Surah Baqarah, the very start of Surah Baqarah, Allah points to this where He says, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. That is the book in which there is no doubt, and it is a guide for those who are muttaqeen, who guard against evil and do what Allah has commanded. Now Allah describes what does it mean to be muttaqeen? What does it mean to be someone who guards against evil and protects this life? In the third verse of Surah Baqarah, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. This point that Allah mentions here first is the most significant aspect of prioritizing your life and making sure you are cognizant of what your life is to do and how to be victorious in this life. When Allah says, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ, those who keep faith in the unseen. This unseen that Allah talks about has 2 or 3 different ways of explaining the unseen. The first and primary way of explaining the unseen is what's called غيب المطلق. that which is the absolute unseen. It can never be seen. And that is the essence and entity of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. That Allah is the absolute unseen. Have faith in Allah. But Allah's explanation of those who have faith in the unseen, maybe it is that I can't comprehend the essence of Allah, therefore Allah's explanation of ghaib doesn't end here, but rather ghaib is also applied to those elements of life which are unseen as well too. For example, the element of heaven, the element of a day of judgment, the element of spirit, the element of those items that exist but we don't have the ability to interact with them on a material level. When a person has faith and yaqeen in something that is unseen, they acknowledge that I have to do more than what I can measure in material return. That whatever I can do in material return is only one part of the equation, and rather the equation is not balanced by simply looking at material consequence and exchange. And that rather there is something unseen that if my intellect is applied, I would acknowledge that I need to do more than just simply count the dollars in my account and enjoy the days of my life. Dollars is obviously a relative term to us here in this country, not to everyone. But this significance of paying attention to the unseen, Allah points to it in a variety of different sequences and positions as well too. From the one aspect, He's telling us that this life is a plaything, meaning the material is something very small in comparison to what you need to achieve. The other aspect of talking about this unseen is when Allah says pray for and prepare for the akhirah. Count on the akhirah. That is of true consequence for you. When we start to think about that akhirah, we start to realize that there are certain actions that we will have to perform whose benefit you can't see in the material world. Whose actions, whose consequence you won't see in the material world, and we don't do them for their benefit in the material world. We do them for their benefit in the immaterial world that we haven't seen yet. That's why this verse continues where he says, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. And he continues from there, right? وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. Allah says the aspect of understanding, do you believe in the unseen, is that you will be amongst those who, when you believe in the unseen, you will perform the prayers and you will give charity from your wealth. Both of these are actions that where we are making physical sacrifices, yet the benefit is not a material benefit that we see. As a matter of fact, we would say the opposite is true. We see a loss. When I make the time to perform my prayers, it means that I'm sacrificing from time where I could be making money. I could be enjoying myself. I could be doing a variety of actions that are interested in my own preservation. But what do? I perform an action that takes me out of my income. When it's Salat al-Dhuhr and Asr, it takes me from my ability to earn and takes me away from the material benefit. When I perform my Salat al-Fajr, it takes me away from my rest and my sleep and makes me prefer something other than my own self-interest. In the evening, when it is the time for enjoyment and rest, I take away from my enjoyment and rest and I perform the prayers. وَيَعْتُونَ الزَّكَاةِ. And those who give charity. The concept of charity is something that intellectually is difficult to accept on the basis that charity is, I need this money, I need this wealth, I worked for this wealth, why should I give it away? But the structure is that when I understand that there is something significant that is unseen, I can make sacrifices from the material and limit the material. The point of this conversation is that when we look at the idea that should I be enjoying my life? Is it wrong to enjoy my life? The statement of the brother where he says, this life is to enjoy. What is the perspective of enjoying this life? Is it haram? Is it bad? Has Allah forbidden it? If we were to take a look at this, we would see that again in Surah Baqarah, Allah has a conversation where He again gives another perspective on this. فَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَقُولُ رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا وَمَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ خِلَاقٍ. In verse number 200 of Surah Baqarah, Allah makes a statement. He says, and from amongst the people are those who do pray to Allah, who acknowledge Allah. There's no problem. They believe in Allah, very much so. But what do? They ask Allah, oh Allah, give me goodness in this dunya. They just ask for dunya because they want to enjoy this life. So Allah says, I'll give them. I don't have a problem with that. But then they have no share in the hereafter. There's nothing for them in the hereafter. And then Allah presents an alternate perspective where He gives the concept of understanding what does it mean to enjoy this life, where He looks in verse number 201 that we all recite and all know, right? وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَقُولُ رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابٌ نَارٍ. Allah draws the example and He continues, أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ نَصِيبٌ مِّمَّا كَسَبُوا وَاللَّهُ سَرِيعُ الْحِسَابِ. Allah in verse number 201 and 202 gives you the explanation of what your perspective of this life should be. He says, go and ask me for this life. He says, amongst the people are those who ask for this life, but along with asking for this life, they ask for their akhirah. And what do they ask for in their akhirah? They ask for goodness in their akhirah, as well as protection from the fire of hell. And then Allah continues and He says, for them, they will have a portion of what they have earned in this world and in the hereafter. This idea of where Allah is giving us instruction and structuring the thought process of how to look at this life, He's not saying you can't enjoy this life. But He's saying don't focus so much on this life that you forget your akhirah, that you forget the unseen, that you forget that there is something that you need to accomplish that you can't see. The perspective of this was beautifully given by one of the other ulama who was having a similar discussion where he says, the value of this life sometimes is the idea of looking at a pencil. Sometimes we look at this pencil and we beautify it from the outside. We want the outside of this pencil to be amazing and attractive, and we pick the most attractive pencil we can. But what's the real value of the pencil? What's inside the pencil? What will benefit us the most? Not the look. We can hold it in our hand, but if that pencil doesn't write, does it mean anything? No, it's trash to us because it didn't achieve the purpose that it was meant to be beneficial to us. The same is true of this life in the example that Allah is setting. There's nothing wrong with enjoying and beautifying this life, but understand the perspective of this life is that this is a plaything, this is foolish. What's inside of you is what really has the value that you need to invest in. Which is why Allah, when He makes His statement, He says, Ya ayyatuhan nafsul mutma'inna. That nafs is something that needs to be valued and developed. Not the body. Not the pleasures of this world that are associated with the pleasures of life. There's nothing wrong with them. But if in our perspective, we make the mistake of investing more in this dunya than in our akhirah, then we have certainly lost and we have wasted the efforts of this life and this gift that Allah has given us. One of the most complete perspectives where Allah Himself elaborates on the statement of وَمَا هَذِهِ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا لَهْوٌ وَلَعِبٌ is given in Surah Hadid, verse number 20, where Allah again repeats the statement and now He elaborates on it. اعلموا أنما الحياة الدنيا لعبا ولهوا وزينة وتفاخر بينكم وتكاثر في الأموال والأولاد كمثل الغيث أعجب الكفار نباته ثم يهيج فتراه مصفرا ثم يكون حطاما وفي الآخرة عذاب شديد ومغفرة من الله ورضوان وما الحياة الدنيا إلا متاع الغرور. Allah takes this time and now He elaborates the entire statement that He's been pointing at in these other verses. And He gives a complete explanation of what He means by this life is nothing but a plaything and an enjoyment. When we look at this verse, Allah begins and He says, know that this world's life is only a sport, a play, an enjoyment, and boasting amongst yourselves and vying for multiplication of wealth and children. The Mufassirin, when they look at this statement, they say that this is Allah giving an analogy of the life of a human being. That the life of a human being is split into 5 phases. It begins with the first phase of simply playing, and then, for example, a process of enjoyment, then, for example, a process of playing, enjoyment, and gaiety. Then it continues with boasting amongst yourselves, and then it continues with vying for wealth and children. And some of the Mufassirin explain, he says, this is the 5 phases of life. You begin your life in simply just sport, enjoyment, play. And then you proceed further and you continue with this process of now, maybe it's not play specifically, but you're in the process of enjoying your life. Then, for example, it's in this process of adorning yourself and beautifying yourself. And then eventually you start the process of amassing wealth. and finally you go to the process of amassing children and lineage. Some Mufassirin said this describes the 5 phases of a human being's life from beginning to end. That in your beginning you will begin with the process of simply enjoyment, playing, and then view to self-beautification and adornment. Others went further and said that no, these 5 phases that Allah is describing are actually broken out into 8-year phases each. And your first 8 years you only play. Then your next 8 years you enjoy. Then your next 8 years you spend in self-beautification and adornment. We see these young men, they love to go to the gym, they love to go out and buy nice clothes, and the belt has to be as expensive as the shoes, and the outfit has to make sure you can see the belt and the shoes, and then there's the hair with the amount of gel, and it goes on and on and on of this process of self-beautification. It begins about 16, 17, and it continues to about 24, 25, and then the measure of success changes from that point in time to how much money can I make? How much wealth can I amass? And then after that, a point in time comes where it's now about amassing children. The ulama, when they give this explanation that this is a breakout of 8-year segments and that there are 5 segments, it says that by the time you are 40, whatever you are at 40 after you've gone through these experiences is who you will be for the rest of your life. And this mirrors the statement of our 6th Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam. I'm not trying to scare the 40-year-olds, but there's some truth to this. That once you've achieved that point of 40, our 6th Imam goes to the statement that whoever you are at the age of 40 is who you will be until the day you die. So if you set your track well and you worked hard to make yourself a good person, that's who you'll be. If you've taken your time and been easy that someday I'll get to Islam, you'll never get to Islam. Because you've set that process of what you will be for the rest of your life. So they look at this verse and they say that Allah explains that these 8-year segments, these 5 8-year segments, talk about the traditional path that most people will go through. And the first 2 or 3 phases are guaranteed, everybody goes through them, and they're almost identical. Where you start with just basically playing, then you start the process of enjoying, and then you enjoy the process of self-adornment. And these 3 everybody goes through. After this, what you do is where the intellect comes in to decide what your life will be like and what your priorities in life are. Allah now explaining these phases of life doesn't stop here. He continues the verse. And he continues and he says this idea of how your life progresses, there are examples for you to look at on this earth to understand why you shouldn't put too much value into this process. So he says, كَمَثَلِ الْغَيْثِ. This life is like the example of vegetation. أَعْجَبَ الْكُفَّارِ نَبَاتُهُ. That the farmer is in wonderment of its growth. And he loves looking at it growth. ثُمَّ يُحِيجُ فَتَرَاهُ مُصْفَرًّا. And then after that, it withers away and then it becomes yellow. ثُمَّ يُقُونُ حُتَامًا. And eventually becomes straw and blows away. Allah is saying that this idea of this life, don't be so fascinated by this life because I've shown you examples of it going in fast phases in front of you. An intellectual person can look at the idea of looking at a dead field and watching it progress through the spring and the summer. At one point in time, that field looks so dead that you can't ever imagine that anything would grow there. And then Allah sends ghayth, that rain which is beneficial. The word rain in Arabic is one of those words that there are many different types of words to describe rain, and each different type of word to describe rain describes the impact of that rain as well too. Allah using the term ghayth is that rain which is the most beneficial to land to grow. And Allah says, this land that you see that's dead, when I send my rain upon it, when Allah interjects His mercy, then you see the process of it growing. And it fascinates you. أَعْجَبَ الْكُفَّارِ. Al-kuffara, the kuffara that's referred to here, kufr comes from the idea of one who digs up. It's referring to the farmers, though some have said that maybe it's even referring to the disbelievers, that they are the ones who are lost in this world. But the essence of the analogy points to the idea that kuffara, a'jab al-kuffara, is referring to the farmer who becomes pleased when he sees that Allah's mercy has come down and his dead field has come back to life. But when that field comes back to life, we know there's a point in time where that which grew and turned healthy and massive and beautiful will eventually start to turn yellow. The field will change colors. And those same plants that looked beautiful and healthy will begin the process of dying. And they will die to the extent where they will turn into straw. Meaning that a live plant that was the beauty and adornment that we were enjoying, soon it will become such that when the wind blows, it will scatter into pieces and blow away and be of nothing of value. Allah draws the parable of saying, look, humanity goes through these phases. In the same sense, look, I have drawn parables in this earth. Do not invest so much in this life and the pleasures of this life that you don't acknowledge that these pleasures will leave you and you will have nothing left after them. Pay attention that it's okay to have this enjoyment, but never at the sacrifice of that which comes afterwards, which is permanent, which is why Allah continues. ثُمَّ يَكُونُ حَتَامًا وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ عَذَابٌ شَدِيدٌ وَمَغْفِرَةٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرِضْوَانٌ. Allah is now saying that that's why don't pay too much attention to this. Pay attention to the akhirah, because in the akhirah is Allah's severe punishment, and it is also His forgiveness, and also His pleasure that you can attain. So focus on that which you can't see, that which is more important. Make that your priority, because this, whether you enjoy it, whether you don't, it will leave you. It won't stay. It ends. And this is why we have the statement, and there's a famous piece of poetry from Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Imam Ali goes through and he recites a piece of poetry and he says, this world is a corpse and the one who seeks it is a dog. And he turns to Ammar. He says, O Ammar, grieve not if the pleasure of this world is kept away from you. Honey is the best and sweetest of food. It is the saliva of an insect, the bee. The nicest dress is made of silk, which is the refuse of a small worm. The most refreshing scent, musk, is the blood of an animal, the deer. The best drink is water, which is also used by even the animals to quench their thirst. Do not invest too much in this life that it becomes your preference. Therefore, the conversation, the comment to say that, for example, is this life for enjoyment? It's only for enjoyment if we have fulfilled the purpose of our creation, which is preferring the akhirah. That our investment shouldn't be to ensure that the enjoyment of this life is something that we enjoy. Because if that's our priority, when we leave this world, we have left nothing behind. We have nothing to take with us to go forward either. The time has been wasted and there's no consequence to it. Allah's desire for this life is that someday, when we leave this world, we take something with us that will benefit us. Today we remember the marhum. Tomorrow, inshallah, someone will remember us. But what will they remember of us? We mentioned the good deeds of the marhum, the kindness that he showed us. All of those points that were mentioned, if you take a look and you see, they were made by the sacrifices from dunya. That what were the things that this individual gave up that we remember him? Had his desires, had our desires simply been the enjoyment of this life, who would have remembered us? What would we have taken with us? This is why even our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, looking at a dead, bloated goat on the ground, turned to his companions and he pointed to them, would any of you even pay 1 dirham for this dead goat? It's a dead, bloated animal on the ground. And they said, no, we wouldn't even pay 1 dirham. Rasulullah says, look at the enjoyments of this life. Look at this life as the value of the worldly possessions. And the worldly possessions are less valuable in your eyes than this corpse is. Don't make that your priority in life. Don't judge your success based upon these pleasures. This is why our Prophet would explain and he would say that this world is the prison for a believer and it is the place of paradise for the disbeliever. The believer is the one who is always preparing for that akhirah and for that leaving. But understand something, even if we are preparing for the akhirah and for leaving, and we are investing in our akhirah and the unseen, it's never an easy thing to leave our family and our loved ones. It's never an easy conversation that makes it simple that, oh, we know what is coming, so therefore it's not difficult to leave this place. Rather, look at the example. When we look to the field of Karbala, there was one Aba Abdullah who knew his status, was already declared Sayyid al-Shabab Ahl al-Jannah, leaders of the youth of paradise. Yet that separation from his family, what a painful process it was. That every year when we think of the masa'ib of Aba Abdullah, we may cry more upon his separation from his family and the difficulties that he faced leaving his loved ones than of the actual masa'ib of the maqtal that are recited. That how painful is it for us to think that when Aba Abdullah called out, Ala hal min nasirin yansuruna, Ala hal min mughithin yughithuna, Ala hal min dhabbin yudhibbu harami Rasulillah, that when the women of the house had heard this voice of the cry of Aba Abdullah, that is there anyone to help us? Is there any aid to come to our aid? Is there anyone to protect the haram of Rasulullah? That the women knew that now Aba Abdullah is preparing to leave us. And they called out, Oh Hussain, where is our brother Abbas? Where is our son Akbar? Where have our family gone? Where are your defenders? And there was no one that was left in this moment. One of the most difficult moments that's narrated in history is the final conversation between Imam Zainul Abidin and his father. Imam Zainul Abidin coming and going from the state of unconsciousness, he says, at one point in time, someone awoke me from my consciousness and I became startled looking at this man's condition, and I said, who are you and why have you come to me? And he calmed me and he said, Oh Sajjad, it is me, your father Hussain. I said, Baba, looking at your condition, who has cut you in this way? Who has harmed you? Where are my brothers? Where are my uncles? Why do I see you alone in this condition? Aina Ammi Abbas? Aina Akhi Akbar? Aina Ibn Ammi? Where are my cousins? Where are my uncles? Where is my uncle Abbas? Where is my brother Akbar? Why do I see you standing alone before me in this condition? Aba Abdullah calmed down his son Zainul Abidin. He said, Oh Sajjad, there is now either you or there is me. No one else has remained from amongst us that is left on this earth. O Zainul Abidin, I leave you the final will and wasiyah in this condition. After this, Aba Abdullah goes to bid farewell to his sister. Aba Abdullah knows what his condition and his success is. The women know what their condition and success of the shuhada is. But there is no easy way that anyone in history has described. How did Aba Abdullah bid his final farewell to those women in that tent? How did he leave that tent? Rather, in the Maqtal, in places it is written, the army waited at the door until they could wait no more. As every time Abu Abdullah would come to the door of the tent, another of his women would pull him back. Another of the women would say, O remainder of Rasulullah, don't leave us in this condition. Until eventually the Mal'oon began to shoot arrows into the tent, that if Hussein does not come to us, that we will go to Hussein. In this condition, Abu Abdullah bid farewell to his women. But Imam Zaman writes in Ziyarat Nahiya, my salam upon the one who, when he was alone and surrounded by the enemy and the sweat of death had overcome his brow, he would continue to move his hands and feet and look to his tents to make sure their security was preserved. When someone asked the context of this, it was that Abu Abdullah had sent the condition on the enemy that as long as Hussein is alive, you will not touch the tents. When he entered into a condition that the army could not tell, is Hussein alive or has Hussein died? Shimr Mal'oon took the name of Zainab and the body of Abu Abdullah. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله 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 بحق حسين وجده وأبي وأمه وأخي. Oh Allah, accept this small ibadat from us. Ya Allah, give the thawab of this majlis by the rights of our tears to Marhum Hussain Ismail and the Marhumin of all those who are present in this majlis. Oh Allah, keep our children and our lineage on the upright path of Islam. Ya Allah, we have gathered here with hajat. By the rights of this majlis, fulfill the hajat of the mu'mineen. Oh Allah, keep our children and our families in the service of Ahlul Bayt. Oh Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahibul Zaman. Make our families from the upright supporters of Sahibul Zaman. And entitle us the Shafa of Baba Abdullah in dunya and akhirah. 1 Surah Fatiha, 3 times Surah Ikhlas, for the ruh of marhum Hussain Ismail and all of our marhumeen, with your loudest of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you, Sheikh Bilal. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you all for attending the 1-year anniversary of the passing of our father. Indeed, this year and the preceding year has been a test to our family. Losing a loved one, as many of us can attest, is amongst the most difficult parts of life. Selfishly, we lost the good times we spent with them. Having this past year with Papa would have been a blessing. But we continuously put our faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I shared this story with Sheikh Bilal this week, and I'd like to share it with you. There was once a Chinese man living on a farm. One day, one of his horses ran away. His neighbor came over and said, "What an unfortunate event." He responded, "I don't know whether this is a good thing or a bad thing." The next day, the horse returned with 2 other horses. His neighbor came over and said, "What great news." The man responded, "I don't know whether this is a good thing or a bad thing." The following day, the man's son was riding the horse, fell and was trampled by the horse. The neighbor came over and said, "What sad news that your son has lost his leg." The man responded, "I don't know whether this is a good thing or a bad thing." The following day, the army was strolling through town. They knocked on the door, and when the man answered, they said, "We are here for the draft." The man responded that my son is disabled and won't be able to join the army. The neighbor came by again and said, "What great news, your son doesn't have to serve in the war." And the man said, "I don't know whether it's good news or bad news." God knows what's best for us in a universal manner. We are patient with His decisions. Admittedly, it's very difficult to go through, but all of you who have offered condolences, visited at my house, at my mother's house, shared stories and pictures of our dad with us, shared beautiful food with us throughout the year, and recited, helped, and joined us in this program and the programs last year, you have made it easier for us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and your families. And of course the Surah Fatihas and the du'as that you have recited in our dad's name at Qabristan and in private is greatly appreciated. With your help, today we are able to celebrate my dad's life and reflect on the various life lessons and amazing memories he's bestowed upon us. We take solace in the fact that his lesson to us is complete, and it is up to us to have him live on in his virtues. Let's please take a moment to recite Surah Fatiha for our dad, Al-Hajj Hussain Ismail. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Please also recite a Fatiha for our Mamujan, Al-Hajj Safdar Jafar, whose birthday we celebrate today, just 4 days before my dad's. Al-Fatiha.
And please, one more Fatiha for Marhuma Nargis Bai Abbas Ali Manji, who passed away yesterday and was buried today. Marhum Askar Ali Hasnali, who also shares a memorial day with my dad. And all marhumin of our family and of your families. Al-Fatiha.
أزور سيدي ومولاي ومؤتمدي ورجاي ذخري وذخيرتي في آخرتي ودنياي الإمام الحسين عليه السلام زيارة مني ونيابة عن والدين وأن والد والدين ونيابة عن كل مرحومين والمرحومات خصوصا مرحوم الحاج حسين غلام حسين إسماعيل والحاج صفدر علي جعفر وعن إخواني وأخواتي وعن جميع المؤمنين والمؤمنات قربة طاعة إلى الله تعالى. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا محمدا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا خاتم النبيين، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى أم المؤمنين والمؤمنات، السلام عليك يا أبا محمد الحسن ورحمة الله وبركاته. زيارة عاشوراء. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن سيد وسيين، السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا سار الله وابن سارع والبتر الموتور، السلام عليك وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبكي الليل والنهار يا أبا عبد الله. لقد أزمت الرزية وجلت وعزمت المصيبة بك علينا وعلى جميع أهل الإسلام، وجلت وعزمت مصيبتك في السماوات على جميع أهل السماوات، فلعن الله أمة أسست أساس الظلم والجور عليكم أهل البيت، ولعن الله أمة دفعتكم عن مكامكم وأزالتكم عن مراتبكم التي رتبكم الله فيها، ولعن الله أمة قتلتكم، ولعن الله الممهدين لهم بالتمكين من قتالكم. برئت إلى الله وإليكم منهم ومن أشيائهم وأتباعهم وأوليائهم. يا أبا عبد الله إني سلم لمن سالمكم وحرب لمن حاربكم إلى يوم القيامة، ولعن الله آل زياد وآل مروان، ولعن الله بني أمية كاتبان، ولعن الله ابن مرجانا، ولعن الله عمر بن السعاد، ولعن الله شمران، ولعن الله أمتان أسرجت وألجمت وتنكبت لقتالك بأبي أنت وأمي لقد أزم مصابي بك فأسأل الله الذي أكرم مكامك وأكرمني بك أن يرزقني طلب سارك مع إمام منصور من أهل بيت محمد صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم اجعلني عندك وجيها بالحسين عليه السلام في الدنيا والآخرات. يا أبا عبد الله إني أتقرب إلى الله وإلى رسوله وإلى أمير المؤمنين وإلى فاطمة وإلى الحسن وإليك بموالاتك وبالبراءة ممن أسس أساس ذلك وبنى عليه بنيانه وجرى في ظلمه وجوره عليكم أهل البيت وعلى أشيائكم برئت إلى الله وإليكم منهم وأتقرب إلى الله ثم إليكم بموالاتكم وموالاة وليكم وبالبراءة من أعدائكم والناسبين لكم الحرب وبالبراءة من أشيائه وأتباعهم. يا أبا عبد الله إني سلم لمن سالمكم وحرب لمن حاربكم وولي لمن والاكم وعدو لمن عاداكم فأسأل الله الذي أكرمني بمعرفتكم ومعرفة أوليائكم ورزقني البراءة من أعدائكم أن يجعلني معكم في الدنيا والآخرة وأن يثبت لي عندكم قدم صدق في الدنيا والآخرة وأسأله أن يبلغني المقام المحمود لكم عند الله وأن يرزقني طلب سارك مع إمام هدى الزاهر ناتك بالحق منكم وأسأل الله بحقكم وبالشأن الذي لكم عنده أن يؤتيني بمصابي بكم أفضل ما يؤتي مصابا بمصيبته مصيبة ما أعظم وأعظم رزيتها في الإسلام وفي جميع أهل السماوات والأرض. اللهم اجعلني في مقامي هذا ممن تناله منك صلوات ورحمة ومغفرة. اللهم اجعل محياي محيا محمد وآل محمد ومماتي ممات محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إن هذا يوم تبركت به بنو أمية وابن آكلة الأكباد اللئين ابن اللئين على لسانك ولسان نبيك صلى الله عليه وآله في كل موطن وموقف وقف فيه نبيك. اللهم الآن أبا سفيان ومعاوية ويزيد بن معاوية عليهم منك لعنة أبدا آبدين. وهذا يوم فرحت به آل زياد وآل مروان بقتلهم الحسين عليه السلام. اللهم فضائف عليهم اللعنة منك والعذاب أليم. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك في هذا اليوم وفي موقفي هذا وأيام حياتي بالبراءة منهم واللعنة عليهم وبالموالاة لنبيك وآل نبيك عليهم السلام. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين زين العابدين. السلام عليك يا محمد الباقر. السلام عليك يا جعفر الصادق. السلام عليك يا موسى الكاظم. السلام عليك يا علي بن موسى الرضا. السلام عليك يا محمد التقي الجواد. السلام عليك يا علي النكي. السلام عليك يا حسن الأصخري. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله فرجك وسخر الله مخرجك ورزقني الله في الدنيا زيارتك وفي الآخرة شفاءتك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائك في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرزك توأ وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين مع الصلوات. سورة بركة الفاتحة.